Some stories seem so old that just mentioning their names feels like the sound of a book closing. But sometimes, an old book can open under a completely new light, when the reader is no longer a child, dreaming of a shimmering dress and glass slippers, but an adult who has tasted loss, bitterness, silence, and the steadfast faith in kindness. This is the story of Ella, the girl named by ashes, and of a heart that chose compassion even when everything had fallen into darkness. In the autumn garden that year, when golden leaves spread into a soft carpet beneath her feet, Ella was still a little girl. Her mother would often hold her hand, leading her through rows of seasonal chrysanthemums, whispering in a voice like the wind, "Ella, you may lose many things in life, but never lose a kind heart." At the time, Ella didn't understand. What was kindness, and why did her mother say it with such determination? Only much later, when those gentle words were the only thing left to her on nights without light, did she realize kindness is the fragile thread that keeps a person from falling into the abyss of hatred. Ella's mother died on a cold morning, when dew still clung to the window ledge and birds were singing innocently. From then on, laughter stopped in the house. Her father, a good man, but too quick to flee from loneliness, brought another woman through the gate. That woman came with 2 daughters, their faces always as if reflected in water, their thin lips curving into smiles, reserved only for their own shadows. At first, Ella tried to believe that a family could somehow be pieced together from mismatched fragments. She set the table, lit candles, folded napkins, arranged glasses. But after her father died suddenly of an illness, those polished, manicured hands began to point and accuse. The pot wasn't scrubbed shiny enough. The floor still had footprints. She woke a minute late in the morning. She asked to read one more page at night. Gradually, the house turned into a stage where Ella played the role of an unpaid servant, while they became the demanding audience who knew only how to throw down commands and scornful glances. The villagers began to call her Cinderella, the girl of ashes, because every night, after all the chores were done, she would rest her head by the fireplace, letting the soot crown her hair with a grey wreath. No one knew that in those nights when the scent of smoke lingered on her clothes, Ella would still tell herself stories. She spoke of her mother's garden, of dawns flavoured with dew, of the sound of the wind through rows of birch trees. She told them to remember, so that her heart would not freeze in tow. There were rainy days that pressed the roof down, when Ella washed a pile of dishes stacked high to her elbows. Cold water seeped into her skin. The leftover grease clung with a sharp smell. She lifted her eyes toward the misted window pane. Somewhere out there, people played music, laughed, loved, dreamed, while she was still standing here, like a nameless shadow. Yet, in the midst of the weariness running down her spine, Ella suddenly remembered her mother's voice. "Never lose your kind heart." She gently placed the last dish on the rack, wiped her hands, and smiled a smile thin as a thread, but enough to stitch back together a day that was tearing apart. News of the spring ball arrived like bells echoing across the valley. The prince would hold a grand feast. It was time. to choose a bride. The entire country buzzed with rustling fabrics and flying ribbons. Ella's two stepsisters suddenly grew sentimental. Does this dress make me look fat? Do these shoes make my ankles look thick? They pulled Ella into endless fittings, forcing her to thread needles, unpick seams, tighten belts, bend stays. When Ella once offered a sincere suggestion that ivory would soften the harshness of their faces, the sisters burst out laughing, declaring that the girl of ashes knew nothing about beauty. And when the house fell silent, they left chaos behind, while Ella cleaned until the moon spread silver over the steps. On the night of the ball, the stepmother looked Ella up and down. She wore her mother's old dress, a gown faded by the years, but its folds still soft like a lullaby. "You are not going anywhere," the woman said, her tone as casual as deciding the temperature of tea. "That dress peasant-like, that face colorless. Stay home and scrub the steps. I want them to shine like mirrors when I return." The door closed. Wheels rolled away. The house was hollow. Ella stood in the hall like a shadow cast outside all joy. She turned back to the kitchen, lit the fire. Flames leapt, painting on the wall the image of a small girl holding herself. One tear fell, then another, until they lined her cheeks like a strand of pearls. It wasn't for a ball. It was for all the years of locked doors, of dreams banished to the kitchen corner, of voices inside her smothered into silence. She heard her own voice, fragile as a leaf. "Do I not deserve to live just one night as myself?" A breeze slipped through the window, lifting the curtain gently. Moonlight streamed in like threads. Then, as if touched by an unseen hand, the fire in the hearth flared higher, casting on the wall a figure that did not belong to this kitchen. A woman appeared, not too young, not too old, carrying with her a warmth Ella had not felt in so long. "You look like a lost star," she said. The voice was so much like her mother's, not in tone, but in the tenderness that made one long to rest their head upon it. "I don't need anyone's pity," Ella whispered, quickly wiping away her tears. "I'm just tired of always having to act strong." "I haven't come to pity you," the woman smiled. "I've come only to remind you that what you need is not a beautiful dress, but permission for yourself. Magic is only the wand. Where you wish to go, where you wish to stand, whom you wish to see, those desires have always lived in your heart." She waved her hand lightly. The pumpkin vines in the corner of the garden shivered, stretching into a carriage like a dream glowing in coral hues. The mice scurried about, turning into tiny coachmen, bowing with clumsy gestures. Ella's mother's old dress did not vanish. It blossomed. Layers of lace soaked in moonlight, ribbons flowing like water, and her mother's stitches from long ago began to shine, glittering like stars. A pair of glass slippers appeared, so transparent they seemed not to exist at all, only light cradling her feet. "Don't think these shoes are meant to make you look more noble," the woman said, placing a hand on Ella's shoulder. "They are transparent to remind you that truth itself is always beautiful, no matter how fragile." "But what if it's all just magic?" Ella asked, half laughing, half trembling. "What if at midnight everything shatters again? Then live each minute as if it were your very first breath. the woman softly replied. "And when everything returns to what it was, you will know that what remains is not the gown, but the courage that has just awakened inside you." The carriage rode down the road dusted with dew. The palace unfolded like a star touching the earth. When Ella stepped inside, every gaze turned toward her like a rising tide. Not because of silk or diamonds, but because she walked as though she had finally remembered she was born to hold her head high. The symphony lifted her steps. Chandelier lights poured drops of honey over her hair. Someone whispered, "Who is she?" Another sneered, "Just a stranger." Then the crowd parted, like two doors swinging open. The prince stood there. They danced to a melody that seemed as if their whole lives had silently rehearsed it. No one asked where the other came from. No one made promises. There was only one gaze that said, "I see you beyond all prejudice and the dust of life." Ella suddenly felt peace, not because of crowns or the thrill of becoming a princess, but because, for the very first time, she wasn't called by a name of mockery. For the first time, she was Ella whole, complete and free. The midnight bell tolled. Time never yielding to anyone had arrived. Ella gave thanks for the waltz, for a night soft as silk, then turned and ran. She didn't flee out of fear of being discovered, but to preserve the purity of the moment. In that fleeting chaos, a single slipper was left behind on the palace steps, not by accident, but as a sign, like a hastily written line. The truth passed here. The next morning, the court announced that the glass slipper would reveal the girl from last night. People scoffed, a child's tale. But it was adults who held the measuring stick, pressing it against women's feet, hoping the shoe would fit the one they wanted. Ella's stepsisters laughed loudly, brimming with confidence as they climbed the chair. Their bound feet swelled and blistered. The stepmother pretended to be blind, pretended to be deaf. The servants looked at each other, weary from counting door after door. When it was Ella's turn, the soldier holding the shoebox hesitated. A girl was scrubbing the floor swiftly in a plain brown dress, her hair tied up hastily. The stepmother said, her tone casual, "That's just the servant. Don't waste your time." But the soldier still knelt. The slipper, fragile and transparent, touched her foot as if it had found its home. No cheers, no shouts. Only the soft exhale of truth, like the sound when you place the final piece into an unfinished puzzle. The crowd pressed in. Jealous cries flared and then died. In that moment, Ella did not look at anyone. She looked up at the ceiling, where a single ray of sunlight slipped through. The light spread across her cheek in a thin layer of honey. She thought of her mother, of her words. She thought of the ashen nights, the dishes that left her hands cracked, the stairs scrubbed until they shone. And suddenly, she felt grateful. Grateful because all those things had taught her a way of loving without complaint, a patience that did not collapse, a kindness that did not break. The rest of the story is often told with a line, "And she became a princess." But if you asked Ella, she would say, the important thing was not the throne, but that from that day on, she could walk through any room, without bowing her head. She could tell herself, in a clear voice, "I am myself, not ashes." The prince, a man who, after all, was only human, with his own clumsiness and stubborn streak, learned to listen to Ella's story as though hearing a wordless melody. And Ella learned to see the loneliness hidden within the gilded halls. They chose each other, not to save one another, but to recognize each other. The day she returned to her old home, Ella walked slowly across the steps she had scrubbed until her hands were raw. The stepmother stood there, the stepsisters stood there, their faces twisted like masks about to shatter. Ella did not speak of guilt, did not claim credit, did not recall the long nights. She simply said, her voice calm as water, "From now on, you can take care of yourselves." At the end of the hallway, the broom leaned against the wall like an old friend. Ella lifted it, stroked it gently. Then she set it down. The door closed quietly behind her, like a falling leaf. In the years that followed, people said the palace grew a new garden. Not one planted to impress guests, but one planted to remember. There, among rose bushes and grapevines, was a small corner for those who had once believed they were nothing but ashes. They would sit, breathe, and share the story of the glass slipper, a symbol of a truth that is transparent, fragile, but unbendable. And whenever someone asked Ella whether that night's magic was real, she often smiled. Magic? Magic is the moment you allow yourself to live as who you truly are. The wand, if it exists, only helps you arrive on time. One early summer afternoon, when sunlight poured like honey over the stone steps, Ella walked along a moss-covered corridor. The sound of a piano drifted from the grand hall, recalling a night long ago. She paused before a mirror. In the reflection, there was no girl in a brown dress with the scent of ashes, nor a dazzling princess. There was a woman standing tall, eyes bright, lips curved in the faintest smile. A woman who had walked through loss, through scorn, through weariness, through half a night chasing time, and still kept her kind heart intact. She touched the mirror softly, as if reaching for a long-lost friend. "Mother," she whispered, "I still have my kind heart." At the window, at the end of the hall, the wind rustled through the birch leaves, carrying a voice that had gone far away and returned. "Now you have grown, Ella." Adults listen to fairy tales not to learn how to dream of castles, but to remember that even when the world calls us by names that are not our own, we can still call ourselves by the right one. That when we have nothing but calloused hands and a few remembered words, we can still choose kindness. And that choice repeated, day after day, is the most enduring magic of all. One night, you may see a girl bowing her head beside a fireplace, a trace of soot in her hair. If you are patient enough, you will notice in her eyes the light of an old garden, where a mother once held her daughter's hand and spoke of kindness. And if you are attentive enough, you will hear her heartbeat keeping time with a waltz that never ends, the music of freedom. And the glass slipper? It still rests inside a velvet-lined box, not as a trophy, but as a small mirror. From time to time, Ella opens the box and tilts the slipper beneath the sunlight. The light shatters into countless fragments. In it, she sees the faces of herself, her mother, and all the girls who were once called by lowly names. Then she closes the box, places it back on the shelf, and walks down into the garden. There, the hands that once only knew how to scrub now know how to plant. The feet that once grew used to bowing now step lightly across stone thresholds, lifting the gaze toward the sky. People still say, and they lived happily ever after. Ella never argued. She only thought that happiness is not a fixed destination. Happiness is waking up each morning and hearing someone call you by your true name, while you can look at life, no matter how weary, no matter how chaotic, through kind eyes. And if you asked her what saved her, the prince? The ball? The slipper? No. What saved her was the decision not to lose herself in the long days, covered in thick dust. A decision quiet and steadfast, like the blue flame in a hearth, not dazzling but unextinguished. In the end, we return to the old question, where is the magic? Magic lies in the way we treat ourselves and others, choosing gentleness over cruelty, kindness over mockery, believing that truth, even fragile as glass, can still stand firm. And when a heart decides so, the entire world shifts, softening itself, like music falling in step with the rhythm of one's walk. One evening at sunset, people saw the prince and Ella strolling along the ivy-covered castle walls. They did not speak of thrones, of jealous rivals, or of future balls. They spoke of flowers soon to bloom, of the autumns yet to come, of how, amid countless daily choices, one must not forget to return to oneself. And when the last light of day fell into their eyes, for the briefest moment, some thought they saw a woman in a simple dress, standing afar, smiling, before fading into the evening wind. The story ends there, not with applause, not with fireworks bursting across the sky, but with a warm silence. In that silence, if you lean close enough, you will hear the faint breath of peace. The peace that comes from a person who, after many years, can finally stand before a mirror and call themselves by their true name, nothing added, nothing taken away, Ella. And if one day you happen to pick up a shard of glass on the steps of your own life, small, transparent, cold, do not be quick to throw it away. Hold it under the sundae. Perhaps in some corner you will see your own face reflected. Not perfect, but true enough to begin again. For we adults, even if we no longer believe in fairies, can still believe in the kind of magic born when we choose kindness, choose truth, and choose freedom every single day.